Okay, we are live. We're live. Hello, Alexander in London, and hello, Levan Gudadze. How
Hello.
are you doing, Levan? It is great to have you with us. A real privilege and an honor.
Hello to everyone. It's a great privilege and honor to me to be invited on your great show. I'm doing okay, and I'm very grateful for your attention.
Can we
Hello.
ask where you're broadcasting from, Levan?
I am now in Moscow region, not far away
Okay,
from Moscow itself.
great. So Levan's YouTube channel is fantastic. I have a link to that channel down below. It is in the description box. When this live stream comes to an end, I will take that channel link and I will put it in the comments down below as a pinned comment. Hello to everyone that is watching us on Rockfin. Hello, Rockfin. Hello to Odyssey. Hope everyone is doing well in the Odyssey chat. And of course, Rumble, our great audience that is watching us on Rumble. Everyone that is watching on Rumble, please hit that like button. To the YouTube chat we go. And hello, everybody on the YouTube chat. Hope all is well. And to our fantastic community on Locals. Hello, everybody on Locals. How are you guys doing? Hello to our moderators. Zarael, I saw you somewhere in the chat, the one and only Zarael, and I see the great Reckless Abandon and the awesome Alan Watson is also helping us to moderate, and I will also be moderating a bit as well. So hello to our moderators. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on what will be an amazing live stream. Hit that like on Rumble, hit that like on Odyssey, hit that like on YouTube, share this video, comment on this video. I never say that. Alexander, Levan, let's talk about what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, Kinzhal's, Patriot air defense systems, and the amazing, incredible technology, the software update that has made those Patriot missiles just take out Kinzhal's 100% track record. Anyway, let's begin, Alexander.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the Ukrainian sophistication is extraordinary. There was a rather wonderful tweet by somebody called Mikhail Valterson. I've been following quite closely, but he said that yesterday there was another big Russian missile strike across Ukraine. Yes. Russians, according to the Ukrainians, launched 30 missiles. The Ukrainians say 29 of those missiles were shot down. And the Ukrainian Energy Ministry says that there's been power cuts in 20 Ukrainian cities. So one missile was able to interrupt the power across 20 Ukrainian cities. And as Valterson, who, by the way, has a background in the Swedish air defense system, points out, that must have been some exceptional, amazing single missile that was able to do all of those things. So clearly there's lots of things that are going wrong and are misunderstood and misreported. And I have to say that my own view is that the credibility of the Ukrainian air defense people has basically collapsed over the last couple of days. I mean, I've never taken it particularly seriously, but over the last couple of days, first with that first claim that they shot down one Kinzhal missile that they first claimed, and they denied, then there were more denials, then there were more claims that they did it, and now it's suddenly become the official line that they did actually shoot down that missile, that Kinzhal missile. Now with the 6 that they claim to have destroyed, I have to say the point has come where I don't think there's any longer any real point in paying very much attention to what the Ukrainians tell us about these things. But whom better to discuss these matters with than Levan? And I want to just, before we proceed, also say that Levan doesn't just run an amazing channel of his own, which is an indispensable one, but he is somebody who actually, I've noticed, peppers my videos with comments from time to time, and extremely helpful they have been, and I want to personally thank you, Levan, now that I've got you there, for all those comments that you've made, which I always read and with great care. But Levan, you're in Moscow, so let's start with the mood in Moscow. Obviously, Moscow region, I think you said, not perhaps necessarily the city, but we are definitely in Britain in what we call a a cost of living crisis. People are under very severe pressure. The Bank of England has said that there's a wage price spiral underway. In other words, prices are rising, wages are rising to try to keep pace with rising prices. That's creating an inflationary loop. And overall, the financial situation, the economic situation in Britain is bad. But in Moscow, we were told that the economy was going to crater, that inflation was going to explode, that people were going to be short of goods, that food was going to run out. I can remember all of these things, that the economy would contract by, well, first it was going to be 20%, then 8%, and all kinds of figures. What is the mood in Moscow? What is the mood in Russia, perhaps generally, not just in Moscow but in the region? I mean, are you seeing huge explosions in prices? Are things becoming really difficult for people? Is there an enormous groundswell of opposition to the government building up?
First of all, thank you very much for your kind words and for invitation once again. When it comes to life in Russia in general, probably many even in Russia are surprised how well Russian economy truly did cope with these thousands and thousands of sanctions. I was surprised personally also because Russia, after all, is most sanctioned country in the world right now. It's just unbelievable what Western elites are doing in that sense. But when it comes to life, at the first stage, it's a year, more than a year now since this sanction war began, up special military operation, and little earlier than that. And at first stage, first few days even, not longer than that, there was some, let's say, panic mode in some parts of society, which is quite understandable. After all, no one knew what will happen tomorrow. Then things calmed down, and since then, basically, we don't see any huge changes when it comes to inflation or any shortages whatsoever, because you can go in any grocery store, anywhere basically, and you don't see any lines of people that want to buy something and they don't have opportunity, or shortages of any goods or services. Really, I mean, everything is surprisingly stable and well, maybe it's a too strong a word, but life is basically okay. Of course, I should say that sanctions did impact Russian economy and did in some sense also impact ordinary life of ordinary citizens, their lives, especially when it comes to, for example, banking system, because traveling become somewhat difficult for Russian citizens because of because Russian banks were cut off from SWIFT system, and Russian Mir card, which is Russia is trying to promote its alternative sorts of. It's accepted in some countries, but not is in many countries that we would like to see it. But yes, to make my answer as short as possible, life is good in Russia, really. I mean, maybe Western audience will be surprised, but it's okay. I mean, no huge explosion of inflation. It's at some point it was even opposite. We did had some deflationary process, which is also surprising. But yes, and now because it's a summertime, we will probably see also some deflationary processes because of these agricultural products will increase its presence on markets. So it's all okay, really.
I'm just going to pass on something, by the way, which I was told by a Russian acquaintance, friend of mine, who's actually come to London from Armenia, of all places. He was in Armenia and then he came to London for various reasons. He is very much on the liberal end of Russian politics, though not completely so. I mean, he's not cut off himself from Russia or anything like that. But some of his friends have done, and they've left Moscow and they've come to, and Russia, and come to the West. And he said that without exception, they're all now complaining that they've experienced a very, very severe drop in their living standards, that leaving Russia has caused them to all experience a very severe drop in their living standards. And that's actually, they're talking amongst each other about perhaps it wasn't such a good idea to leave. And some of them are apparently thinking about coming back. And I was, I found that an interesting thing, but anyway, that's what he said. And he also said that, especially because he's specifically from Moscow, that Westerners underestimate what a modern city, an advanced city, Moscow especially, has become. But of course, it's not unique like that in Russia today. So anyway, I just thought I would pass that on because I thought, obviously, it's an anecdotal thing, but it came from someone, if you like, close to the sort of emigration that's happened.
I will agree with you absolutely, if I may take a minute, because as you know, I'm originally from Georgia, and many Russians, for example, did live in the beginning stage of special military operation, left Russia and they went to Georgia, and many of them are now trying to come back, and they can really. I mean, they are not will be treated any differently. They may think that there may be some difficulties here, but no. And many are coming back. And I believe since the recent developments between Russia and Georgia, as you know, Russia did lift visa requirements for Georgian citizens, and there will be direct flights between two countries. And I believe many of Russian citizens are in Georgia will come back and then may travel again back and forth. But in general, I will agree that many people that left Russia now, even famous people, let's say, not just ordinary people, but even well-known public figures are now trying to come back in Russia because of living standards that they were used to in Russia, and then they are in different situations. So it's
which is for someone like myself, as I said, grizzled veteran of the Cold War period. I mean, that's a pretty extraordinary thing, that people are complaining that, living standards in the West are so much lower than what they were used to in Russia. Anyway, let's talk about the situation in the military sides, because I know you keep a very careful track of things. And I'd like to discuss what is the big story at the moment. Now, today in the British media, we're hearing about the great victory Ukraine achieved in Kiev on the 16th of May. That they shot down all the missiles, that the Kinjal missile, the hypersonic missile, has been exposed as a useless piece of junk. It can't hit the target. It's easy to shoot down. This has changed the face of war, apparently. Putin's bluff has been exposed. And interestingly, the British media briefly passed on these American admissions that the Patriot missile had been damaged. But I've now seen all that sort of melt away. We now have everybody saying about the great victory that Ukraine achieved over the skies of Kiev on the 16th of May. The Russian Defense Ministry is telling us a completely different story, and I gather that there's been more information from them today. Do you want to tell us what they're saying?
Basically, according to Russian Defense Ministry, for example, Shoigu himself, Defense Minister of Russian Federation, did said that by some, Ukrainian side now are capable to shut down more Kinjal missiles that we are even using during missile strikes, and he's probably trolling because it's truly laughable at this stage. These stories that are coming from Ukrainian side officials in air defense area, it's laughable. No one probably are believing it, and Russian Defense Ministry come out with the official statement that during the missile strikes on 16th, 5 Patriot launchers were destroyed for sure, and one Patriot radar. So that's, I guess, confirmed information, because I don't really have a reason to doubt when defense ministry is so precise in its statements. And according to some other data, there was 2 Patriot batteries in that area. We all see probably these pictures when firstly, these Patriots shot some 30 missiles. And then we did see 2 explosions exactly in that area. And according to some reports, it was not just 1, but 2 Patriot batteries there. One was destroyed and second one was damaged. So it was a huge blow in my understanding that was done to air defense systems of Ukraine. And I guess Washington will be in some damage control mode now. And they will try to minimize effect of this, because after all, they need to sell these Patriots somewhere. And what best way to deny any destruction of Patriots and say that, you know what, Patriot is so good that they can shut down like 5, 6, 10, and many more Kinzhals, which is just hard to believe, truly.
My own view is that it was that that film which showed the 32 missiles being launched and then the explosions that followed, the 2 big explosions, that basically destroyed any possibility for Ukraine to succeed in its claim, because the pictures are there. You can't really get around them. And I also get the sense that the Ukrainians are extremely angry about that film, and they've been hunting down the people who made it. Do you have any information about that?
Yes, unfortunately, some Ukrainian bloggers end up in trouble, and as I understand, FSB, not FSB, but SBU, Ukrainian Secret Service, already detained 6 bloggers that shared this footage on their social networks, and probably they will hunt down many more Ukrainian citizens that just share video that they may be made on their own or just share from some other platforms, which is once again does show how desperate at this point official Kiev is, because after all, it's they are that claim they are democracy and they have free speech and the rest of it. But in reality, unfortunately, Ukraine is a very difficult place to be right now, and to conduct any journalism, really.
Absolutely. Can I just ask, because of course the other big story for me about this is that there's now rumors, they're unconfirmed rumors, that the people in Washington, that the US is actually very, very dismayed by what happened in Kiev, and that there's been meetings now taking place within NATO about this, because it turns out that the Patriot system that was actually delivered to Ukraine was the absolute top end system. It was the one that was geared towards shooting down ballistic missiles, and that it failed in the way that it did has been is creating a major crisis, and that there's all kinds of discussions and talk about this. I mean, would that be? Does that make sense? I mean, was this the high-end system that people are saying it was?
I'm not a military expert, and it's hard to me to say, but that's what reports that we are seeing, that this system was part of anti-rocket or anti-missile systems that US is trying to create all around Russia, at least. And yesterday we had some reports that in Poland now, there was some meeting, and they are trying to, because of this destruction of Patriot, they are now trying to increase air defense of logistical hubs that have been used to transfer Western military equipment to Ukraine. In my take, there's no way Russia will conduct any operation on Polish soil, but still, this information does show you level of panic in the West, because this system was especially made to strike missiles, to shut down missiles, and they did not. They just failed. And I guess it's a big deal for US military industrial complex, US militaries, and that's why they are now in defensive mode, in damage control mode now, and trying to somehow change a subject of discussion. And that's why they are trying to, by their controlled media, keep society's attention towards these Kinzhals, many Kinzhals that were shut down. But in reality, I guess Pentagon will have some serious discussions when it comes to air defense systems of the West, because if this is the best what they have, then they have some trouble on their hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and of course, it comes in conjunction with the fact that the United States has been creating bases for anti-ballistic missile interceptors close to Russian territory. This has been a major issue now for some time. So, if the Patriot doesn't work, that presumably calls into question the logic of that deployment as well.
Yes, absolutely, because Russian side for quite some time were articulating this topic that Washington was planting some military infrastructure that was, in theory, capable to shut down Russian ballistic missiles. But it seems like, if Patriot, as you said, if Patriot is not capable to deal with the current Russian missiles, then all those billions and billions probably was wasted. I don't know.
Levan, I'm not a technical person, but perhaps you can explain a little bit about Russian technologies, or at least capabilities in hypersonic systems, because my impression is that the Kinzhal is actually the least sophisticated of these systems. We're hearing about the Zircon, which is apparently a cruise missile, which is apparently a much more sophisticated system, and which is now entering service and apparently flies even faster. And also about the Avant-Garde system, which is a winged vehicle, which is a glide vehicle. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about what those are and about what the deployment situation is with them.
So, as you said, Kinzhal is probably least sophisticated among these hypersonic missiles that Russia is developing. You mentioned Avant-Garde. Avant-Garde basically has unlimited range. That's how capable that glided hypersonic weapon is. And if Kinzhal is almost uninterceptable at this point, Avant-Garde, which has a capability to change its trajectory during the hypersonic flight, probably for a long time there will be no weaponry, anti-air defense system weaponry that will be capable to deal with it. And when it comes to Zircon, it's almost the same. As I said, I'm not a military expert, but these two systems that will enter Russian service are much more sophisticated than Kinzhal is. And they were not used, and I don't think they will be used during this conflict. And I guess if Washington or if NATO find it hard to deal with Kinzhal, which is improved version of Iskander, that's why they are quite similar in look, these two missiles, then they will definitely find it impossible to deal with the Zircons and Avant-Gardes. But unfortunately, I cannot go in details because
but anyway, that provides us. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask is this. Of course, it's something of a surprise, I suspect, to some people in the West that these missile strikes are still happening across Ukraine, Russian missile strikes, because I was reading in March last year, about 2 weeks after the special operation began, that Russia was about to run out of missiles. And I read that every couple of weeks. In fact, about every 6 weeks, they tell us that the Russians are about to run out of missiles. Do you see any sign of that from Moscow? Where you are. Is there any real indicator that this is actually the case?
No, to be honest, I did find strange that Western media outlets or Western officials did pay such attention to this topic that Russia will run out missiles, Russia will run out ammunitions, when if Russia knows how to produce something, it's weapons. That's from Soviet era. All those factories, they still operating, especially when it comes to production of military systems. And as I understand, and even officials in Russia are saying that production of high-end, let's say, military equipment did increase quite a lot. So it's a kind of maybe Western elites, Western media trying to somehow calm down themselves, because there's no way Russia did run out of missiles. And we are seeing time after time, especially lately, last few weeks, that Russia is actually increasing missile strikes. I guess this is this is done to influence this so-called Ukrainian counteroffensive that was announced for quite a while now, and Russian side was very effective to deal with ammunition depots and warehouses. But still, this increase in Russian missile strikes shows that there is no problem with missiles or missile production in Russia, and that's why I find it strange that West even try to manipulate with this topic. I mean, who gonna believe in this kind of stuff? I mean, I don't know.
Absolutely. I've never known a war which the Russians have fought in which they ran out of weapons. I mean, that isn't something that has ever happened. I mean, even the First World War, where they started with a deficiency, they had actually started to make it up. So this has never been the reason why the Russians have ever lost a war. And I can't imagine that it's going to happen this time. And just since you are Georgian, can I just make a further small point, which is that I was told many years ago by somebody who does know that the single individual who played the biggest role in creating the military-industrial complex in Russia was a man called Sergei Ordzhonikidze, who was the People's Commissar for Heavy Industries in the 1930s. And he was apparently a brilliant manager, and he played an absolutely key role in organizing that. I probably mispronounced his name, for which
Ordzhonikidze. Anyway. Ordzhonikidze. That's right.
Ordzhonikidze. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the battlefield situations, because I know you've been keeping a very careful track of that, as I'm trying to do. I'm not anybody who has much experience of this, nor of you, but I think we both formed a certain view about what's actually going on the battlefields. And I do get, again, the very strong sense that Bakhmut has turned into a huge trap for the Ukrainians, that they made a big mistake trying to defend it to the extent that they have. And what is your overall assessment of the battle, of the state of that battle?
Just a few minutes ago, before we start live stream, I did read on Russian media outlets statements from Denis Pushilin, head of DPR, Donetsk People's Republic, and he is quite careful in his statements. And now his first time said that it seems like Battle of Bakhmut will be over fairly soon. So he was quite optimistic in his statement. And basically, if we take a look on the map, it's only Domino part of this so-called citadel area is left under control of Bakhmut garnison. It's small area, so-called Samolyot area, aeroplane area, and a little part in private housing. I guess it will, of course, I don't know detailed information if I'm not communicating with PMC Wagner units, but I guess if they achieve quite significant success during the previous days to establish control over this citadel area, last corner that is still under control of Zelensky, Bakhmut garnison, I guess before end of this week, this battle truly will be over. And my guess is that today, tomorrow, in coming days, Kiev will probably try to withdraw its forces from Bakhmut, and they may keep some positions in Krasnoye, that's a settlement between Bakhmut and Chisov Yar. They may tried to hold on to some positions there, and then Chisov Yar. But when it comes to Bakhmut itself, it's as you said, it's not really understandable why Kiev did throw so much forces, so many military personnel in this so-called meat grinder, when it was obvious from very beginning that PMC Wagner plan was to use Bakhmut as a kind of magnet to deal with as many Ukrainian military units as possible, and they were very successful doing so.
Yeah, I should say, and I don't know whether you've seen it, Levan and Alex, but there's an extraordinary video appeared from, obviously taken from a drone, which shows this last remaining area of Bakhmut, which is being fought over. It comes with a very unfortunate, to my mind, classical music track and a rant from Prigozhin as a background, but it does give you a very good picture, a very good sense of what is left now, and it is very little. I mean, you can get it very quickly. And the other thing that astonished me watching this film is the sheer intensity of the artillery strikes. I mean, they seem to be all over the place all at the same time and going on almost continuously. So I cannot imagine that this place can withstand this kind of attack for very long.
No, it's just a matter of few days, and the Battle of Bakhmut is effectively over, I think.
I have to ask this: what is the sentiment in Moscow about Prigozhin? I mean, we've had lots of speculation about him in the West. I've expressed my own view personally, which is I think this man has put himself through too much. I mean, I find even seeing film of the fighting difficult, and he's there right in the thick of it. That's my own personal view. But is he popular? Is he not popular? Do people side with him? What is the sentiment about it?
I don't have poll numbers, but I can share my observation. And to be honest, Wagner, PMC Wagner, and Prigozhin, they are quite popular in Russia. They gain respect in Russian society, especially during the previous few months when Prigozhin became quite active in media sphere, and the society did receive much more information about Wagner activities on the front lines. So I think Prigozhin right now may be one of the most famous or popular public figures in Russia. But yet again, I don't have poll numbers. I cannot say exactly. But when it comes to PMC, they are also gaining very significant popularity. That's for sure.
Do you think he has a political future in Russia? Do you think he's somebody who might make a political stance? No.
I think some people, because of his popularity, some may think that he is becoming political figure, especially because of this kind of confrontation between him and the leadership of Russian Defense Ministry, but which was too much, I guess, especially to present this conflict on the public domain. But I don't think Prigozhin will become political figure, or he wants to become political figure. I don't think so.
Right. Well, have you heard any further news about what's going on other battlefields? Because there's a lot of talk and rumors about, events in Avdiivka, in the northern areas near Kupiansk, always in Ugleda. Trouble is, we don't have a Prigozhin who's there to keep us up to date all the time. And also, one gets the sense that the drama of Bakhmut, and it has been an extraordinary drama, has basically sucked the attention away from everything else. But there's quite a lot going on in other places too. Is that your?
Yes, absolutely. There are quite serious activization of sites, let's say Kupiansk direction, and I believe once situation in Bakhmut will be resolved, fairly soon after that, Russian side will become quite active in Kupiansk direction, also in direction of Seversk. It's just logical, in my opinion, because next stage will be Kramatorsk-Slavyansk defense lines. So to do so, you need to establish control over the Kupiansk and Seversk directions. When it comes to southern part, Donetsk direction, it's Marinka. Probably you all see pictures from Marinka. This town is almost completely destroyed. There's nothing left there. It's just devastating situation. And to be honest, it seems like Marinka did play almost a similar role as Bakhmut did, in smaller scale, but it was also kind of mid-grinder, because Zelensky leadership of Ukraine was sending and sending more and more reinforcements in direction of Marinka, and Russian side, according to information that we have, Russian side was neutralizing those units one by one, and that's what is happening there. I think Ugledar, not Ugledar, but Avdiivka, if you see on the map, Avdiivka now is almost in similar situation that Bakhmut was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And I guess Russian side probably will try to use exactly the same tactic in Avdiivka also, to use this town as a sort of magnet to force Kiev to send more and more reinforcement and deal with these units one by one. And Zaporozhye and Kherson regions, it's artillery duels usually between the sides, and I think these directions will become a hot point in coming weeks, because that's a land bridge between Crimea and mainland Russia, and this anticipated by many counteroffensive, Ukrainian counteroffensive, main part of it will probably take place on that direction, if it even happens, which may not, because...
Yeah, we'll come to the counteroffensive in a moment, but can I just make a suggestion about this Ukrainian propensity to cling on to places and to lose huge numbers of men in doing so? Now, this is exactly what you would expect from an amateur strategist who's concerned about face. An amateur clings on all the time to undefendable positions, and they have a tendency to invest in failure, if you like, because they don't want to lose face by announcing pullbacks. Whereas what you have on the other side are complete professionals. Yes. They don't think in those terms. Now, sometimes, and if you've been a professional yourself, you know this, that sometimes a gifted amateur can pull something off unexpected and can win a trick from time to time. It can be very embarrassing and annoying, but over time the professionalism of the professional wins out. And I have to say, I think this is what we're seeing in Ukraine. Zelensky and the people around him are basically amateurs. Even the Ukrainian military leadership, Zelensky, who is the commander, he's actually quite young. He doesn't have that, depth of experience some of the Russian officers have. And, he seems to be very easily controlled by Zelensky himself, and he seems to be very ideological. And Syrskyi is an older man, but he's also got all kinds of personal issues. Apparently he's Russian, so I've heard, and he's got all of those sort of concerns. So it's something that one is used to. And of course, sometimes you see it in legal cases, by the way, that, that when somebody's representing themselves and have no legal training, they can prolong a case beyond exhaustion. But when they lose totally, because over time, things stack up against them. And that, it seems to me, is very much the pattern that we're seeing in the fighting in Ukraine now.
Yes, completely agree with you. It's a huge difference between approaches that the Ukrainian side and Russian side has. The Russian side don't hesitate to leave some positions to save soldiers, because that's tactic, as I understand, of Russian side. It's keep your soldiers safe, because you can always regain positions. always. And that's what Russian side does. For example, a few days ago, Russian side did leave some positions on flanks of Bahamut. And what? Russian side did save lives, but during the very same time frame, according to some sources, Ukrainian forces lost 1,500 to 2,000 soldiers killed and wounded. Is it worth it to gain these small parts of territory with such high losses? I don't think so. So approach between sides definitely are significantly different, and I'm truly surprised why nobody in Ukraine are speaking about it to change something, because they are time after time throwing this forcefully mobilized at this stage soldiers, reservists, into mid grinder in different directions, which is don't make any sense, not in military terms, not in any terms whatsoever. So I completely agree with you.
What is the feeling in Russia about the course of the war? I mean, are people nervous about it? Has there been criticisms of the way the war has been conducted? Do you get the sense that, especially after the events of the autumn, when, as I said, Russia pulled back in a lot of places, that there might have been, a certain turning away from the government, criticism of the government at that time and of the military leadership? What is the mood now?
Basically, yes, at the moment when this Kharkov regrouping or retreat happened, there was some difficult atmosphere in Russia, because many citizens didn't understand what was going on. And after all, we are civilians. It's obvious that we're not going to understand everything that militaries are doing. No. But since then, let's say what Kherson, when it happened situation in Kherson, when Russian side left, there was no panic really, because this time militaries and the leadership did explain to society what they are doing and why they are doing it. So there was very little destruction in the society. Of course, there are some criticism, because as I said, for civilians, it's hard to understand always what is going on. But right now, to be honest, I don't think that there are large number or in society that are critical towards leadership of Russia. Putin has somewhere around 75 to 80% of support by latest polls. And yes, we may see some criticism time to time, but overall, I think society is very much behind the government. So.
I should say, by the way, that there was an incredibly bitter article that I saw somewhere in the West about a Russian researcher used Russian social media to interact with young people in Russia, who was expected to be the most anti-war people. And I get the sense that he didn't find that he was making he didn't make any progress at all with all of that. And he seems to have taken it extremely badly. And I also read a long piece by Yuri Levada. Perhaps you could explain to people who he is and his polling agency. But he was coming up with all these polling figures, which showed support for the government, support for Putin, support for the war, support of all of those things. And again, you got the sense that he was very unhappy and embarrassed by it.
Levada Center is one of the main, let's say, organizations that are conducting polls. It's well known in Russia. They are regularly conducting social studies, and they are quite reliable. One may criticize them, one may not, but even according to data that they have, society is firmly behind the Russian leadership at this moment. And you can, even from young generation to old generation, you may think that young generation are probably less patriotic. They are, raised on these Hollywood movies, and they don't care about anything. But in reality, you're going to find young generation are very much pro-Russian, and very much, they may not care about politics and politicians that much, but when it comes to state and lifestyle, then they are very defensive, and they are firmly behind Russian interests, let me say this way, because when it comes to politics itself, young generation maybe don't really care about elections, and I guess that's the case in every other country also, because I was young also, and
I should say that was exactly my own experience about young Russians. That was some years ago when, you know, pro-Western sentiment was supposed to be very high. I had interactions with some Russian universities, particularly the one in Perm, and I found that the student body, the attitudes there were completely different from what many people in the West thought that it would be. Of course, that was Perm, but then Perm is a city in the Urals where there is known to be a sort of liberal tradition as well. So, you know, it was so anyway, but I mean, they were deeply patriotic and certainly not you know, pro-Western in any conceivable way. That was certainly my impression.
What is fortunate, what is good that I can observe, you're not gonna see anti-Western sentiment. Yes, you're gonna see critical attitude towards Western elites in general.
Yeah.
But when it comes to ordinary relationships between ordinary people, you're not gonna find here any xenophobic stuff that is quite that are now seeing in Western states, where you know, it's almost freely. Some Russophobic statements have been made in different cities or states. But here, I'm happy that we are not seeing anything like this. So people are still friendly, but at the same time, they do understand that it's a conflict between Russia and the Western elites. And yes, when it comes to choosing sides, of course, vast majority is choosing patriotic stance, no matter they are supporting Putin and current ruling party or not. It's just they are on patriotic stance, and that's how it's supposed to be, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say again, I mean, I'm only able to read the English language Russian media, but again, it is striking how much more measured they are and nuanced they are in talking about the West than we are here in the West when talking about Russia. You read the British media today, I have to say I am shocked by it, and you know, I didn't imagine it could be as bad as this. So I mean, it's good to hear that Russians are not responding to that in the kind of way that we would respond to that here. Now, what about all these diplomatic initiatives that we're hearing about? Now, the African countries are coming to Moscow.
Yes.
The South African army chief has been in Moscow. I don't think this has been widely noticed, but he's just been there. But the African states are sending a mediation mission. Li Hui has had what I suspect was not a very easy meeting in Kiev, but he's heading to Moscow as well. What is the mood in Moscow amongst people there about these possibilities of peace talks? I mean, does anybody think there's any chance of that happening?
Very few, because unfortunately, it's quite, even though it's a noble gesture, noble step from China, from South Africa, from other nations, Brazil, that are trying to mediate and push this peace narrative. But unfortunately, almost everyone do understand that as long as Washington and London are not willing to talk about peace and peaceful negotiations, these attempts from different countries and even regions will fail. That's an unfortunate reality that we are living in. And I guess once this so-called Ukrainian counteroffensive will fail, if it even happens, then things will start to change because we are noticing little by little that mood is changing, at least in some countries in Europe. And this support of Zelensky and his people not going to continue forever. So I guess at that point, Washington and London will change their position, and we may see peace truly, maybe before end of this year even. But not now, unfortunately.
Yeah. Can I just agree with that, by the way? The more the Western public sees Zelensky close up, the less they like him. I mean, he's been in some Western countries now, and people have seen him, close up, not from a distance in Kiev, and he does not make a good impression when and the same was true when he went to the United States, by the way, turned up in Congress in his flak jacket and T-shirt. It's not something that you get much in the media, but even in the media sometimes, you start to see flickers of criticism whenever Zelensky comes to town. Can I just say, we talked about the West, and I'll get to come to the counteroffensive in a moment, but are people nervous about the amount of military support the West has been giving to Ukraine? I mean, mighty United States, Britain, Germany, of course, which Russia has fought wars against. They're giving tanks, they're giving aircraft, they're giving machines, bombs, all that kind of thing. Does that make people nervous? Are they afraid that the Russian army won't be able to cope with this?
No, not whatsoever. The West can deliver as much weapons as they want, but if they read a little bit, and they probably are reading history of Russia or Soviet Union, they will probably know that when it comes to defending motherland, then society is quite united. Society can keep with as many difficulties as needed for victory. So there is no panic mode in Russia. No one is happy, of course, with these weapons deliveries, especially when Germany did, for example, decide to deliver its tanks. Of course, it's because of this story, Second World War. Of course, people were very much unhappy about it, but not because they are afraid of some Western military equipment, but because these parallels that did emerge of Second World War, and now again German tanks are gonna fight our soldiers. But when it comes to overall situation, I think you're not gonna find panic mode in Russia. I guess everyone is understand that if it's necessary, Russian side may even conduct one more wave of mobilization or second wave of mobilization. Even then, government will not lose its support. As long as society is thinking that government is doing all it can to defend Russia interests of Russian citizens, they will have all support they need. So you're not gonna see some kind of panic, even if we will see a second wave of mobilization, for example.
That is very important because Alex and I, as I'm sure you know, we've been saying that the whole strategy in the West is to create panic in Russia. I mean, they don't really have any other strategy. I mean, that seems to be what this whole thing is about. And Ukrainian officials, by the way, have increasingly been talking in that way, that this is what their plan is, to create panic, and that they're going to succeed in this offensive by creating panic. Let's talk about this offensive. I mean, first of all, do you think it will happen? And if so, where?
I think when it comes to large scale, as we all know, Western officials and Western media are talking about some large-scale counteroffensive that will change tide in this conflict. I was very skeptical from very beginning about any possibility that Zelensky will be able to pull off large-scale offensive operation, because they don't have enough manpower, they don't have enough ammunition and military equipment, but they do have about 50 to 70, 80,000 reserves. That's the last reserves that they really have that are more or less battle ready, as I understand. And they can use this reserve to conduct local scale offensive operations in Kherson and Zaporozhye region. And I guess because of this high pressure from Washington and London and some other Western capitals, even though if Zaluzhny, let's say, is sure that this offensive will be suicidal, probably they will not have an opportunity to refuse orders from their Western masters, and they will conduct offensive operations, and they will achieve some success for first, second days for a few for initial stage, because that's just what you expect during any offensive operation. But once the Russian defense line will stop them, and once these offensive brigades that are participating in offensive will run out of steam, it will be a Russian term, and I think Russian counteroffensive will probably be devastating for those Ukrainian units that will be part of this Ukrainian offensive. And with that, I guess we will see beginning of the end of Ukrainian armed forces as a more or less capable entity, because it will impact. It will impact mood and morale of Ukrainian armed forces all along the front line. So that's why I guess lately I was thinking that not just large scale, but maybe Zelensky and his military leaders will refuse, if they have enough independence, to conduct even local scale offensives, because they know this is the last reserve they have. If they are losing it, then they lost. They have no hope even after that. So I'm quite skeptical about large scale operation, but local scale offensives in Kherson and the Zaporozhye region, yes, probably will take place, because I don't think Zelensky or Zaluzhny are able to say no to Washington or London. Yeah. I just don't think so.
I agree with that. By the way, my impression is that the Ukrainians are now trying to come up with every conceivable excuse that they can to postpone this thing as long as possible. So first it was the weather. Now they don't have enough tanks. Then they haven't got enough aircraft. They need the F-16s. Yes. They know they're not going to get the F-16s anywhere near in time, and probably never will. So, but they're coming up with every possible excuse that they can come up with in order to put off the evil day when they have to launch this thing, which I think they know deep down that they can't succeed in. And
absolutely.
By the way, the other thing is that the mood about this offensive in the West has darkened, or it continues to darken almost all the time. And there was a particularly interesting article by a man called Michael Kaufman. You probably don't know him, but I think he's Australian, actually, Australian based, but he's an analyst, very pro-Ukrainian, but at the same time, clearly an intelligent man. And he also seems to think that this offensive its prospects are not good. So, there's a darkening of the mood about it. And yet at the same time, there doesn't seem to be any way, any will, any ability to simply call the whole thing off, even though it probably, or at least it's my own feeling, will have exactly the consequences that you say. It will throw away their last reserve.
I guess maybe I'm mistaken, but I guess leadership of Western states now are kind of hostages of their own propaganda. They did spoke so much about these offensives and Ukraine gonna win this war and stuff, that now they cannot just take another position. That's my feeling, that they are just hostages of their own propaganda now. So
absolutely. I just wanted to finish with two topics. The first is China. I mean, because one of the new themes that we're getting a lot in the Western media is that Russia has now become a province of China. That Xi Jinping has come. He came to Moscow back in March. He took over the entire country. Russia is now entirely dependent on China. Now, this is nonsense. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that absurdity. But is this getting any traction? Because clearly these comments are intended not so much, it seems to me, as to inform the Western public, but the hope is that they'll be fed back into Russia itself, that it's going to create problems between Moscow and Beijing, between Russians and Chinese. Is it having anything like that kind of effect? And what is the general feeling about China?
Absolutely not gonna affect Russian-Chinese relationships. Any attempt from West to somehow influence that. But when it comes to overall take on Russian-Chinese relationships, I guess society will probably be happier if these relationships, which is on a great level right now, will become even greater. And maybe Western media outlets are pushing this narrative that Russia is kind of some province now of China. But in reality, all the data that we have does clearly shows that Russia is increasing its trading relationships, not just with China, but also India. Yesterday, we had the information that Russia is the second trade partner to India, which is a huge deal, really. And Russia is very proactive in many other directions. And to be honest, I don't see any how should I put it? Society is not taking Russian-Chinese relationships with any threat.
Yeah.
So it's,
that's my impression too. I should say, and just to say on the Indian issue, Russia is now, as you said, India's second biggest trading partner after China, and that is a complete transformation over the last few years, and it's going to grow further because, of course, at the moment, Russia is the big exporter. India isn't yet exporting back, so there's a big imbalance in trade.
Yes,
much of this trade is being conducted in rupees and rubles. Russia is building up big rupee reserves, so they're going to have to spend them in some way, and the way they're going to do it is by importing Indian goods. And India does make lots of things, by the way, contrary to what many people appear to think sometimes, from high technology goods to light consumer goods. You're going to see that trading relationship take off, in my opinion, over the next few years. People are underestimating it. I wanted to just finish with the country of your birth, your nation, Georgia. The relationship between Russia and Georgia has been an extraordinary one, going all the way back to the 18th century and beyond. My own impression, by the way, is that you're talking about the Russians. They've had, historically, culturally speaking, a tremendous love affair with Georgia and with Georgian culture. And it is impossible to underestimate the extent of Georgian cultural influence in Russia. I mean, you only have to spend any time in a Russian city to understand this. Do you get the sense that things are starting to improve because they've gone through a very difficult period? We've had the visa changes, we've had the flights, the direct flights now. There's obviously a lot of opposition in Georgia itself, which is not, I'm not going to be judgmental about this. I can understand why. But do you think that we're starting to turn the corner here?
Hopefully, yes. Hopefully, yes. I was saying on my channel many times that this is first decade, Georgia enjoyed a peaceful development since the collapse of Soviet Union with current government of Georgia. And as we know, Western elites, especially Washington, was very active to somehow influence current Georgian government to impose sanctions on Russia, to become a kind of even second front. There were much talks that Washington will sacrifice Georgia in that sense. But even recently, if you remember, there were some anti-government protests in Georgia, and the reasoning was this law about foreign agents. But in reality, many did openly say in Georgia that was just a reason to shake a situation, to destabilize country, and then conduct some regime change operation. Current government did manage to stabilize situation, and statements that we are hearing from Tbilisi are quite optimistic. Just a few days ago, Prime Minister of Georgia, Garibashvili, did make statement answering criticism from Washington about this improvement in relationships between Georgia and Russia. And he said that if Washington wants to, they can also give us free movement. They can also open their borders for us. But in reality, even when Russia was requiring visas, 80% of Georgians who apply for visa were receiving visas. But when it comes to US, it's only 30%, something like that. So current Prime Minister of Georgia was quite critical towards Washington, and you're not going to see this kind of stuff very often, especially in small countries. But yes, hopefully they will manage to improve relationships. There are some difficulties, of course, because after 2008, Russia did recognize independence of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. That's a big issue between two countries now. But I believe there are some ways to go to deal with this situation. Let's say confederation. Just South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Georgia can join in a confederative state, and Moscow will probably not be against this kind of stuff. It will just recognize this new state, and that will significantly improve situation on the ground. But yet again, I'm really happy because I'm from Georgia, as you mentioned, and I'm truly happy that Georgia, after so many troublesome times, eventually enjoying some peaceful development, and looks like things gonna go better if Washington will not intervene. Once again, we should remember that yes, it's always this danger that Washington may use its means and then do some regime change, and God knows what will happen in that case. So
just two things to say about that, Levan. Firstly, I agree about what you said. My own personal view is that the reason we saw this crisis in 2008 was precisely because Washington was intervening. If Washington had just stayed out of it, that would never have happened in the first place. And the second thing is your point about Georgia having a decade of peaceful development. My brother, who regularly visits Georgia and loves the country, has confirmed the same thing to me. And one would certainly not want that to change. I mean,
absolutely.
Who would want that to change? I mean, perhaps some people in Washington with their chess games that they always play, which are disastrous for the people who they turn into pawns, might want to change that. But I hope certainly that relations between Georgia and Russia improve. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. That's me for today. I'm going to thank you, Levan, for answering all my questions. I'm going to pass on to Alex now.
All right. Levan, you have 15, 20 minutes to get to some questions from viewers.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah? Okay,
yes,
let's all right, let's go. Let's get to some questions here. From Andrea Miob, could the US still use countries close to Russia to try to keep the war going in the face of peace efforts by China, countries like Georgia and Serbia especially? How can this be prevented?
We just spoke about these risks that Washington can try at least to use some former Soviet republics, in this case, let's say Georgia and Moldova, for example, to somehow cause some trouble between the Georgia, Moldova, and Russia. Theoretically, it's possible, but hopefully Georgia will resist. Georgia will keep its stand. Moldova is a little bit different situation, and we are hearing from current leadership of Moldova quite strong anti-Russian statements. And I'm afraid it's even today, President of Moldova, Sandu, did make statement that they are waiting for some geopolitical opportunity to deal with the situation in Transnistria, which is, I mean, one can interpret as a possibility to reopen this civil war that happened decades ago and somehow establish control over this area, which will be great, which will create great difficulties for Russia for many reasons. When it comes to Serbia, it's hard to say because Serbia is in extremely difficult situation, and hopefully there will be no conflict between Serbia and Kosovo. And if that's the case, then I don't see how Washington can use Serbia against Russia. We all understand that because of difficult situations, one day leadership of Serbia may impose some sanctions on Russia because of the heavy pressure, but I don't think it will derail friendly relationships between the nations. So,
all right. Sanjeva Levan, why do you think the Russian MOD and government doesn't take information warfare PR seriously? Proper PR or better development of soft power could have won Russia more allies and even prevented war, don't you think?
I will agree. I will agree that Russia is not really paying enough attention, in my opinion, to creating this soft power. And unfortunately, my channel itself is for good example, because I do hear from many members of our small community that they are looking for information. They want to know more from other side, but unfortunately, they are finding it a little bit difficult. And it would be great, of course, if Russian government will pay more attention to public relations. Of course, I do understand Maria Zakharova does a great job, and probably she is one of the most famous representatives of foreign ministries in the world currently. But as your subscriber mentioned, society probably needs some more information from Russian side, and I guess there is a way to go there. So maybe in the future, Russian side will pay a little bit more attention to public relations. And one should always remember that Russian media outlets are blocked in the West.
True.
Many Russian media outlets is blocked, and it's not really easy to be presented in the Western world right now. So that's one reason behind this.
Good point. Yeah, very true. Alex K says, Levan, how is the situation in Georgia and where are things heading, considering there's a lot of pressure on the government to align with the West?
Hopefully, what me and Alexander just spoke about, hopefully Georgian government will resist this pressure from the West, and the relationships between Russia and Georgia will develop in a better way. I'm absolutely sure that there is every opportunity to deal with the current difficulties between the sides. And yes, hopefully Georgia and Russia will become, if not strategic partners, good, friendly states. That will be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Jana Williams says, Levan, have you heard of the Fatima prophecies and Russia's role in the world? What do you think of this?
Unfortunately, I did not hear about. I don't know.
I think we'll cover that. We'll cover that on our follow-up.
We'll cover that. Okay. How about Rick F says near 100% captured, and Ukrainians hold a few buildings. Yet yesterday's New York Times headline was gains near Bahamut raise Ukrainians' hope for turning the tide. That was yesterday's headline from the New York Times.
Unfortunately, these big names in media, like New York Times, Washington Post, and many others in UK, they were great, very well respected media outlets that becoming some kind of tool, cheap tool in the hands of Western elites. And this is truly unfortunate because when I was growing in journalism, and I was in journalism since 17 years, I was thinking about these media outlets as a top level. And now we are seeing this extreme deterioration of quality of their work, because what kind of change of tide, for example, this media outlet is talking about, it's not even laughable, it's sad. It's just
yesterday's headline.
Yeah. It's just sad, truly. I mean, in what planet they are, really. I mean,
yeah, I agree. Iskander Zulkarnen says, is there a possibility of a military coup in Ukraine?
Oh, I think so, yes. If and when this so-called or anticipated by many counteroffensive of Zelensky's regime will begin and fail, I think Western states, including Washington, including USA and UK, will probably distance themselves from Zelensky himself. I guess Zelensky's voyage through Europe, just recent one, maybe was attempt from Zelensky's part to gain some additional time for himself also because maybe he understands that West is already distancing themselves from Zelensky. And once this so-called counteroffensive would fail, and if it even never begun, probably Washington and London will distance themselves from Zelensky, and they have enough influence on Ukraine's military intelligence under the leadership of Budanov. And they have enough influence on Ukraine's military that they will probably conduct some regime change. Maybe that's a possibility in my understanding. And Zelensky, how should I say it? If he's lucky, he will manage to escape. But if not, then
he's got many homes. He's got many homes to escape to.
Yes.
That's for sure. Danielle asks an interesting question, kind of tongue in cheek, but it's a very interesting question. Do you think Zelensky will be back from his friend's wedding any day soon? The real question is, where is Zelensky, Levan? Where is he?
Yes, absolutely. For more than a week now, as I understand, there are rumors circulating on the internet that during one of the Russian missile strikes, leadership of Ukrainian military was killed or wounded, and among them Zelensky and Syrsky. And we are only seeing some photographs of these individuals in recent days. They are not appearing in media, but yes, I don't know, where is Zelensky really? That's a question. That's a question for now.
Andreas says Hungarian Foreign Minister Szijjártó announced that they had enough of Ukraine and are going to block any further EU sanctions and help for Ukraine. Is it realistic? What will Brussels do about it?
Hungary is one of the few countries, in my take, that are at least trying to conduct itself as adequately as possible in this very difficult situation. But after all, only so much pressure Hungary can withstand. Yes, they did block this 500 or 600 million euro transfer from EU to Ukraine. But unfortunately, I guess after some time, Hungary will be forced to lift its ban. And they are demanding now from EU, as I understand, to lift sanctions from one of the Hungarian banks. So it's a negotiation process between the sides, as I understand. But I guess, at least in Russia, we will always remember that Hungary was one of the few that was at least trying to conduct itself delicately in this very difficult situation.
Yeah, there are rumors actually, and I've had some people email me these rumors, this information, where they are saying that Hungary, the Hungarian oil company, I believe it's called Alexander. I think it's MOL, MOL, or
yes,
yeah, they're in negotiations with Naftogaz, I believe. Is it Naftogaz or
Naftogaz?
Ukrainian.
Yes.
It's either the oil or gas. It's either the oil or gas. And during the negotiations, there's a lot of Hungarian publications that are saying during the negotiations, the Ukrainian oil company actually threatened the Hungarian oil company. And they said, if you don't lift the blockade, then we're not going to deliver anything to you. And they actually said, and here's the most interesting part, the Ukraine side actually said that Ursula von der Leyen approved this. She approved of the blackmail. And we've gotten a statement from the EU saying that Ursula von der Leyen never said anything of the such. So she's distancing herself from these negotiations. But there's a lot of Hungarian journalist publications that are starting to talk about these negotiations and how the Ukraine side was trying to threaten the Hungarian side, and then they were using the EU to do it. So the relationship between the two countries is just
deteriorating quite significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. Elena, Iraq is leaving the dollar. At this rate, can the USA afford all these confrontations with everybody?
I'm not expert in finances, but I guess as long as the US dollar is still main reserve currency, they can afford it. They will probably increase the debt ceiling in coming days. They will print as many dollars as they want. In 10, 15 years' time, when the dollarization process will be in full steam, then the US may end up having some trouble. But for now, and Alexander knows about it, and Alex much more than I do. For now, I guess US is okay. So,
do you want to comment on that real quick, Alexander? Or?
Well, I think Levan is absolutely. I mean, they are going to raise the debt. They will raise the debt ceiling. I mean, that is a given, and they're not going to run out of money at any immediate point. I mean, they're just going to be able to print. Now, over time, and we're not talking about perhaps so much time. I mean, this process has accelerated the move away from the dollar, but it's not going to be visible tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So, I mean, and, you know, we have to work within political time as well as economic time. Economic time is accelerating, but it's still going to be in years. Political time works from 1 week to the next, and sometimes even from 1 day to the next. And we're not going to see the collapse of the dollar in the next few months.
John has an interesting comment here. Distinguishing people from their governments seems to come very easily to the Russian people, something very rare in the West.
Well,
can I just comment on that? I think one of the reasons for that is the enormous influence amongst Russian society of Russian literature. It's the most literary society. I mean, and this is something that Russian literature has always been extremely careful to do. I mean, this is very much the Russian literary tradition. And of course, you can always argue, you know, the literature expresses the feelings of the people, and that the people are to some extent shaped by the literature. But Russian literature has never been, you know, xenophobic or anything of that kind.
Oh, yes.
Well said. DF says, how does BlackRock gas asset acquisitions impact Russian objectives in Western Ukraine? U.S. courts in New York have seized assets in Cuba and Argentina. It's an interesting question. Levan, Alexander, do you guys know about BlackRock?
Well,
or just businesses in general, actually, their interests in Western Ukraine?
Absolutely.
Monsanto comes to mind, for example.
I'm going to say straight away, I don't think this features in Russian policy planning at all. I think they have their objectives in Ukraine, and I think they're going to follow them. And what the Americans do on the sides, I mean, this is now no longer for the Russians the priority. Their priority is to achieve the objectives that they set themselves at the start of this conflict back in February 2022. And once those are achieved, then everything else will fall into place. One wonders whether BlackRock and Monsanto and all those companies will really want to be involved in Ukraine at that point.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Easy A says, are we officially in Cold War 2.0, Levan? Do we have a Cold War?
I hope so, no, but there are some indicators that we are, if not in Cold War 2.0, are very close to it, very close to it. So there are some indicators. And first of all, this attempt from the West to build some iron curtain between Russia and West. Russia did not participate in it, but Western states, unfortunately, did so. And that's one thing that very, very much reminds Cold War era to our part of the world, when it was almost impossible to travel between the sides.
True. Jetset.1 says, as long as the Western leaders can go on PR visits in Kiev, they have a platform to provide weapons, and the Azovs have a platform to terrorize the people within Ukraine. Go for the head, not the arms.
Well, there are many. I do see these kind of questions. One, why Russian side are not acting against leadership, for example, of Ukrainian armed forces, military intelligence, or political leadership. I guess there is some reasoning behind it. There is some reasoning behind it, and it's easy from us to be critical, to criticize. But I guess I have to trust on this point Moscow's decisions because it's hard to tell that it will be better if Russia will act extremely aggressively in this manner.
Very true. Rome V says, how can Russia rebuild its military reputation?
Well, once Russia will achieve decisive success, there will be no questions left, I guess. So.
Very true. And Elza asks, if Zelensky is really gone, would that change anything to the conflict?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so. As I understand, the Ukraine have been run by representatives of Washington and London mainly, and the changes in personalities in Ukraine, I don't think will play a huge role.
Alexander, your thoughts?
No, I agree with that. I mean, we mustn't focus too much on personalities. As Zelensky goes, he'll just be replaced by someone else who will be the same or worse. And if I could just go back to the previous point about why did the Russians go after the command centers? Well, let's just go back to our earlier discussion, the one Levan and I had with each other about the fact that you've got amateurs in Kiev fighting professionals on the other side. Do you want to replace those amateurs with professionals? I mean, in a kind of sense, I mean, why would you want to replace a Ukrainian leadership that is acting in the way that it is, in this kind of way, with people who might be professionally better? Or the alternative is that you might get people who are more incompetent, but even more violent and even more dangerous and even more reckless. So I think that from a Russian point of view, they've looked at this, they've said to themselves, going after Ukrainian leaders would not be looked on favorably by most of the world. Nothing much is going to be gained by doing that. So just let's leave them alone.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's do one or two more. Elena says, Levan, Russia remains friendly towards the West, you say, but do they trust the West after Nord Stream?
When it comes to trust between the political leadership, of course, trust probably will be ruined for decades to come, unfortunately. I hope I'm wrong, but it will be very difficult to rebuild relationships between the states. But if we are talking about relationships between ordinary citizens like MI, then there is nothing to rebuild because nothing was ruined. You're not going to see here in Russia any xenophobic sentiment in public. It's just not happening. So I did see sometimes questions on my channel. Is it safe to visit Russia? Because I'm from Western state. And I was answering, I mean, just don't worry about it. I mean, there is no changes happening here in terms of attitude towards Western societies and even states. I mean, no one hates USA or France or Germany or any other country. It's just not happening. It's not our thing, let's say.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll do a last one here from JB6802. Is Russian society horrified by the pushing of sex ed on young children in the US? I think kids have a better childhood in Russia.
I guess sometimes I do say that Russia, when it comes to Western civilization, and Russia are part of this civilization in some sense, probably Russia is the last stronghold of traditional values and normality, let me say, because here we don't have such a ideology that in US or in Europe or in the Western world are now have been imposed on society. And I'm not going to say what is good or what is bad. I'm comfortable here in Russia that we don't have it. And, I think it's a good place to raise kids and good place to live, basically.
All right. Very good. Marian, anyone noted as missing since the bunker buster bomb in Kiev a few weeks ago?
NATO, yes, this Ukraine,
top brass.
this is a story that simply won't go away. Can I just say, I mean, we've had people who would know, and they have repeatedly told us that no one has gone missing. So yes, some kind of a bunker was destroyed. People were killed. They were almost certainly all Ukrainians. There's no evidence, none at all, that anybody top from NATO was killed. So I can't repeat this continuously. I've said this many times now. This story that hundreds of NATO officials or scores of NATO officials were killed in that strike is wrong.
I mean, I think the story originated in Greece, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. And Rafik, I see your question with the podcast with Dr. Hudson and E. Michael Jones. We are working on it, Rafik.
Absolutely.
All right, so that is everything for today. That was a fantastic live. Thank you very, very much to Levan Gudadze. Levan, I will have your channel's information down below as a pinned comment. It is also in the description box as well. Everybody, go check out Levan's YouTube channel. It is one of the best YouTube channels out there. Alexander Mercouris in London. Any final thoughts, Alexander, Levan, before we sign off?
It's been a wonderful program, absolutely amazing program. And Levan, let's definitely have you again.
Thank you very much. I cannot express how grateful I am for your attention. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thanks to your audience, your wonderful audience.
Thank you to our audience as well. Spasiba, I see in the chat. Thank you very much to everyone that was watching us on Rockfin, Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, our amazing Duran Locals community, the duran.locals.com. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to all our moderators, Reckless Abandon and Zarael, Peter, Alan, Spartan, Warrior Queen, and I think I got everyone for today that was moderating. Thank you very, very much to our moderators. And thank you very, very much to our moderators who also helped us put this live stream together. Thank you guys for all of your help. We really, really appreciate it. Great job. Take care, everybody.